Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Time with Junebug. That's me. And I know it's been a while, and that's because y'all need to grab a snack, because I have 10 pages of notes in front of me right now for this case. So I wore my B shirt because you're gonna be here for a while. Or not, whatever you choose. I'm not gonna force you to stay here. And sorry if you hear any kerfuffling. Rocket is chasing a fly. But you know what? It's keeping him busy, so I will take it. But yeah, this is gonna be a long one, so if you want a snack, grab a snack. So I found this case, I don't even know how, but I saw the name of it, and I was like, what? What does that mean? And there's a lot of info, but yet not enough at the same time. So today we are going to talk about the 8 known victims of the Hammersmith nude murders. You heard that right. I saw the title. I just stumbled upon that title somewhere. I forgot where. The Hammersmith nude murders. I'm like, what's that? Why? And I fell down a very giant rabbit hole. 10 pages of notes worth of a rabbit hole. So we're talking about 8 known victims today. So that's a lot. So that's one of the reasons it will be longer. But this takes place June 1959, November 1963, and then between 1964 and 1965. So this is a lot. It's a span. And the ages, I always say the ages in case anything with children bothers you. There are thankfully no children in this, but the ages are 21 to 30. And this takes place like West London and near the River Thames. Now, unfortunately, this is unsolved. But I always start with some pop culture references in case you've seen one of these and you're like, oh, that one. So let's dive into the pop culture references that I saw. So there was the episode of Great Crimes and Trials, episode Fred Dinage Murder Casebook Series. There's an episode of that. Then there was, I believe, it's like I'm not quite sure if it's a movie. I think it's a documentary, but it's called The Dark Sun, The Hunt for a Serial Killer, that came out in 2018. There is also a Black Sabbath song, yes, I know, I was a bit surprised, called Fairies Wear Boots, that referenced this. I didn't quite get how, but I was like, okay, sure, I believe you. There's also a book called Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Leicester Square, which came out in 1969 by Arthur LeBurn. There's a book adapted into Alfred Hitchcock's movie Frenzy, which came out in 1972. The movie The Fiend, which also came out in 1972, is based on this. And the book Bad Penny Blues by Kathy Unsworth, which came out in 2009. I totally forgot how many pop culture references there were, so that was a lot, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna do a quick rundown of kind of what this is before I dive into the victims, because the victims will take a while. So this is about a series of 8 murders, as you probably could have guessed, in West London from 1959 to 1965. All the victims were women. Granted, I feel like we could have guessed that, unfortunately. They were all prostitutes / sex workers. They were all young. I also noted after I wrote down this, I learned that they were all very tiny women. I think like 5'2" or less, or maybe 5'5" and less, because I want to give myself a range. But they were tiny women, and they were all found naked along the River Thames, hence why it's called the nude murders. And also, due to them being found naked, the press named the killer Jack the Stripper. Yeah, I don't like that. Just to throw that out there. So when I also saw Hammersmith nude murders and then Jack the Stripper, again my interest was piqued. I'm like, what is this? Why? And here we are. Now, given how big this case is, I will not be giving every detail because I want to have mercy on myself and y'all. But I will give what I can. So let's start now with the victims. So the first victim, like chronologically, she wasn't connected to Jack the Stripper until years later. But chronologically, she is the first victim, and her name was Elizabeth Figg. She also sometimes went by Ann Phillips. That's just a note I want to throw out there too. Due to them being all prostitute sex workers, a lot of them had aliases or other names they went by. I will put like the most prominent ones, but just wanted to let you know. So Elizabeth was born March 24th, 1838 in Bebington, Cheshire, England. And I might butcher some of these names. I apologize, England / London, just that area. I don't know. I didn't really see anything about her childhood or like anything up to the crime, except that she would turn to prostitution at some point. Which sadly led to her death. She was, I guess now's the time to throw it in. This might be a bit graphic. So she was strangled to death on the night of June 17th, 1959, and left on the north bank of the Thames River. Or the River Thames, my bad. Now, police found her on one of their patrols of the area. Since it was like a known lover's lane, they did frequent patrols of the area. She was found naked, except for her dress was like torn down to her waist. So there was nothing up top. It was just kind of hanging there. And it's most likely thought that a client killed her in their car before, I hate saying it, but dumping the body, quote unquote. And it seems from what they gathered that this killer took off with her underwear, her shoes, and her purse. The purse I can maybe understand because there could be money. The shoes and the underwear give me extra creeps. This whole case is creepy, but that's just like, okay, do you have to do all that? And those things have never been found. Now, a post-mortem photo was released to the public, which that's the only photo I can find of Elizabeth, but I'm not going to put it in here because it's a post-mortem photo, so yeah. But that was released to the public, and her mom, unfortunately, I would hate to be someone's mother, and that's how I find out the whereabouts of my daughter. But also Elizabeth's roommate recognized her, and then they ID'd her, and that's how her identity was found. And Elizabeth was only 21 when she was killed, which is, I'm still young at 25. Like, I can't even imagine, just life's done, 21. And she didn't get a say, and that's horrible. But you know, we gotta push through. We got 7 more ladies, unfortunately. So the second victim, which again, second chronologically, this victim was also connected years later to Jack the Stripper, but again, chronologically, she's the second victim. And her name was Gwyneth Rees. She also went by Georgette Rees, Tina Smart, and Tina Dawson. So Gwyneth was born August 6, 1941 in Vale of Glamorgan, Wales. Again, I don't know much until she was about 16. I saw it was said she was like a troubled teen and she would move to London, England in 1957. I saw she lived with her sister there, and she would, unfortunately, given these circumstances and the fact she's a teenager, she would have 2 children. One was, they said was the sister's. Like, I don't know if it was when it was acknowledged that the baby was truly hers, but the sister pretty much took the baby on. And the other baby went to just another family. So she didn't keep them like in her care. And at some point during that could be due to why she had children so young, she did turn to sex work to make ends meet, and due to her being quote unquote troubled from what I saw. And she was actually a sex worker for the last 6 years of her life. She would disappear on September 29th, 1963, and would be found weeks later dead on a household refuse disposal site, which was in Mortlake near the Thames. She was found when a worker... I forgot about this part. Okay. But she was found, remember, because she was like on a disposal site. She was found accidentally when a worker, again, accidentally decapitated her. She was dead at the time, but it's still, it's a bit gruesome. I totally forgot about that part. But yeah, he was leveling the refuse, like trying to level this disposal site, and he got her with a shovel. That's rough. Sorry, should have warned about that. I totally forgot about it, maybe because I chose to black it out. But obviously the police were called, and she was found nude, but she was wearing a stocking on her right leg. And then the true cause of death is unknown, due to, it's been weeks since she was probably killed, and she was accidentally decapitated. So they couldn't really tell if it was strangulation due to, And she had only just turned 22 when she was killed. Now, I do want to know, I hope this info is right, because this website where I found details about her in particular, malware warnings kept popping up. So I didn't stay on that website long, but hopefully it's right and something was just being weird. But just, if something's wrong, the website was malware-ish. So now we're moving on to the third victim, who was the first one originally, when they started connecting these murders. But she, chronologically, is the third victim, and her name is Hannah Tilford. She also went by the names Hannah Lynch, Ann Taylor, and Ann Taylor, both spelled differently. And no, she is not that Ann Taylor. But Hannah was born August 19th, 1933 in Heddon-on-the-Wall, Northumberland, England. Now, I don't know much until her adult years, where she had 2 children, and she had turned to sex work like the other girls to make ends meet. It said she went missing in January of 1964, and her body was found about a week later on February 2nd, 1964. She was found on the foreshore, which I had to look that up because I wasn't quite sure what that meant. It's basically the spot that when it's high tide, it's covered. When it's low tide, it's not. I was like, oh, okay. Didn't know there was a name for that. But she was found on the foreshore of the River Thames, which seems to be where all these ladies end up. She, again, was naked. She had teeth missing, which I don't believe the first 2 victims had teeth missing, but she did. Like, that weren't missing prior. Like, the killer took her teeth. And her underwear was shoved into her mouth. So, not great. I also saw she was pregnant at the time of her murder. She was pregnant with her 3rd child. She had been strangled, and then dumped into the river, hence why she was washed up onto the foreshore. But the police think she may have still been alive, but like unconscious from the strangling, and they believe that, like, it's listed as drowning was the thing that actually, like, did her in. Now, due to her, like, remember at this time, they weren't looking for a serial killer. So they actually thought her death was a suicide. Hence also why the drowning is kind of listed as her cause of death. They thought maybe she just jumped into the river, or they really thought it was a suicide for a while. And unfortunately, she was only 30 years old. Now, on to the 4th victim is Irene Charlotte Lockwood. Her other names she may have gone by were Sandra Russell and Sandra Lockwood, or Sandra. Sandra. Now, Irene was born September 29th, 1938 in Wockeringham, Nottinghamshire, England. She went to Wockeringham School until she was about 14, 15 years old. She worked on her grandpa's like pear tree farm after that for about a year. Then she would move to London at some point, and then per usual, would have to turn to sex work to like make ends meet. I saw that she in particular, I didn't see it mentioned with the other women, but she had run-ins with the law due to prostitution. I can't guarantee the other ones didn't, but I saw like it was listed that she did have run-ins with the law due to it. She was actually seen on a pub the night of April 7th, 1964, and that is the last time anyone saw her. Her body was found not far from where Hannah's was found later on. Like Hannah, she was strangled, but believed drowning was the quote-unquote real killer. She was naked, and like Hannah before her, she was also pregnant at the time of her death, and she was only 25. Now, it was after Irene's death that the police started putting the pieces together that, hey, this could be a serial killer. So that is when, it was around this time they connected those two earlier murders, like the first chronologically, 1 and 2 victims, they connected them to this killer. So now instead of just this one woman being a victim of a killer, they've now connected it, so it's now the 4. Now the 5th victim, her name is Helen Catherine Bartholomew. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I didn't see her going by any other names, but she may have. Helen was born June 9th, 1941 in Ormiston, East Lothian, Scotland. Now, one source said she was the 5th child of her mom, Mary Thompson, and the first known daughter of her dad. It said her dad was a World War II French resistance fighter who died in the war. It was said she was fun, she was beautiful, and just like a free spirit. Like, people just seemed to really love Helen. She was also accused of being involved in a robbery in 1962 when she was about 20 years old. She pled not guilty, but was sentenced to 4 years in a London prison. I didn't really dive too deep into that because that's not the point we're here for, but just wanted to throw that in there. Now, she was released the following year, like just 1 year into her 4-year sentence, after people learned the victim of this robbery had a record and was deemed very untrustworthy, like known to have lied in the past. So they just let her out. Now, again, she was in the prison in London, so she just ended up staying in London when she was released. And again, would turn to sex work to help make ends meet. But I also saw she could have possibly been one since she was 16. I didn't quite know. The articles were a bit conflicting. But yes, she would try to make ends meet whilst trying to follow her big dreams, I saw a website said. I don't know if she wanted to be an actor, model, or what exactly, but she had big dreams she wanted to follow in London. And sadly, 1 year later, and a few weeks after Irene's murder, Helen was found dead on April 24th, 1964. She went missing on the 22nd. She was found in an alleyway in Brentford. She was found naked, also had front teeth missing, and she flecks of industrial car paint on her. So that was kind of a slight break in the case. Now, her cause of death was strangulation, like the other women. And her case, again, is known for bringing the first, real clue to who the killer could be. And they were guessing due to the paint splatters, it was someone working in or around car manufacturing. And again, Helen was only 22 years old when she was killed. She was a couple months from her 23rd birthday. So now, the 6th victim, her name was Mary Fleming. She was born September 16th, 1933 in Clydebank, Scotland. I don't know much except she would get married and have 4 kids. The marriage it just said it fell apart, and she would move to London with the kiddos. I assume she had the kids with her, but she moved to London to start over after her marriage fell apart. Again, I don't know if the kids came with her. I didn't see an article that specified. So I don't know. I assume, but I can't guarantee. Sadly, again, like all these other poor women, she had to turn to sex work to make ends meet. That's why I'm wondering if she did have the kids with her, and that's a lot to take care of in any time period in history. So you would need many to take care of and feed all of those children. Mary would go missing on July 11th. Oh, Sorry. Mary would go missing July 11th, 1964, and her body was found July 14th, 1964, on a street in Chiswick. And it was noted for her case that many people heard a car like speed off in the middle of the night she was most likely murdered. Again, she was found naked, she had teeth missing, and also had the same super small paint flecks on her. The cause of death, again, strangulation. She was only 30 years old. So the seventh victim, her name, the first one I saw was Frances Brown, but her real name could also be Margaret McGowan. This is one where I'm not 100% sure which one's the alias, which one's the real name. I've seen both in articles. I'm gonna also call her Frances, one, because it's what I saw first, and two, because in articles I saw with her son. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but she was referred to as Frances when it was articles with her son. So I feel like if her son's calling her Frances, I feel like maybe I should too. Again, I don't 100% know if her birth name is Frances Brown or Margaret McGowan, but she went by a lot of names. She also went by Frances Quinn, Anne Sutherland, again, not that one. Donna Sutherland, also not that one. Susan Edwards, and Nuala Rowlands. So there's a lot of names. Now, Frances was born January 3rd, 1943 in Glasgow, Scotland. She seems to be the most elusive, quote unquote, of the group. She would eventually move to London and do sex work. It was said she was a quote unquote high-end sex worker though. It said she worked in like an upper class area. Her clients were usually like businessmen and rich politicians. So she was like a high class prostitute, I guess. But due to her being in a more like higher end area, she would testify at the trial of Stephen Ward, which dealt with the Profumo affair. I didn't know what this was, but it was apparently a very big thing back then. I was very much not born yet, so have some grace with me. So if you've heard of that, she testified at this trial. She may have had 3 kids. I'm not 100% sure. There could have been a daughter born in Edinburgh in 1961, a son in London in 1963, and another son, which I know this guy is real based off of articles, but his name is Frank Quinn, who was born outside of Glasgow in 1964. Now, she was last seen October 23rd of 1964 getting into a client's car. Excuse me. And unfortunately, her body was found over a month later, November 25th of 1964, on Horton Street in Kensington. She, again, naked, missing teeth, and covered in the paint flecks. She had also died from strangulation and was only 21 years old. I guess a co-worker, if you would call it, another sex worker in the area, was able to provide a description of the client and the vehicle they were driving, which the vehicle was possibly a gray Ford Zephyr. Again, don't know cars. I'm gonna put a beautiful collage of what it could have possibly looked like. So now we're moving on to the 8th and final victim, again, that we're aware of. And her name was Bridget O'Hara. She also went by Bridie O'Hara and Bridget Moore. But Bridget was born March 2nd, 1937 in Dublin, Ireland, and would move to London some point later in life. She struggled to get her footing in the city, it said, and she would turn to sex work to support herself. Now, I honestly saw the least info about her. She possibly had a husband. I saw like one article, but then it like kicked me out when I wanted to go back to read more because I wasn't like paying for the subscription. So I was like, dang it, okay. So she possibly had a husband. I'm not 100% sure. She was last seen at a pub on January 11th, 1965. Her body was found over a month later on February 16th, 1965, near a storage shed behind the Huron Trading Estate. I know I'm a broken record, but she was found naked, and I believe she also had some teeth missing, but she did have the paint splatters on her body as well. Now, her case made the police believe the killer was most likely storing the bodies before dumping them. because I believe she was found, because it was, which makes no sense. I heard she was like partially mummified from like heat, but this was in the winter. Maybe where he was storing them was warm, but it said she was partially mummified when they found her, unfortunately. She is believed to be the last known victim of Jack the Stripper, and she was only 27. Okay, now that we've gone through the victims, I did bare minimum, unfortunately, but it's just, this video would be hours long. And there's plenty of things I listed at the beginning of the video you could watch or read about the case if you wanted more info. Yeah, there's many things. It's an old case. I'll just be giving cliff notes, basically. And it's gonna be a longer video. We're still maybe halfway through. Just if you need another snack, go get one. Now, the chief superintendent in charge of the case was John DeRose from Scotland Yard. And if you remember, the Scotland Yard was mentioned in my Keith Simpson video, which I might link at the end. And during this investigation, almost 7,000 suspects were interviewed. That's a lot. That's a lot. And in spring of 1965 was when a match to the paint splatters found on some of the women's body was found. Like they found, I don't know if it was like a can of the paint, but it was found beneath a hidden transformer on the Huron factory estate, which is where, like, the area where Bridget was found. And then soon after that, it was falsely reported the suspect list was down to 20, then to 10, and then 3 people. So very hopeful to the public, but this wasn't true. This was never the case. So sorry to have your hopes slashed as well, but it's just never happened. Author Anthony Summers pointed out how 2 of the victims, Hannah Tilford and Frances Brown, or Margaret, were connected to the 1963 Profumo affair, as I mentioned earlier. So there could be something there connecting it. Now, some of the victims were also involved in the underground party scene. So it's been theorized the victims may have all known each other, and maybe the killer as well. Like, he also could have been part of this scene. It's also noted, like, even though we don't 100% know that these are just the 8 victims, it is believed that the stripper killings stopped after that, like, initial news conference after Bridget was killed. So with that, this is just some minor things about the investigation. Let's dive into the main 6 suspects. Yes. So again, just go get another snack if you need another snack. So the first suspect honestly kind of makes me laugh, but you'll see. His name was Kenneth Archibald. A couple weeks after Irene was killed, and Irene was the 4th victim, this guy who was Kenneth, who was 57 years old and a caretaker at a tennis club, he just walked right into a police station and confessed to killing her. And the police were like, well, all right, that was easy. So he was charged and tried with her murder in June of 1964. However, he got on that stand and pled not guilty. And then after the trial, the jury also found him not guilty due to the fact there's no evidence to point to him being the killer. Like, none to even connect him to the crime. He also did not know any of the locations where the bodies were found, or where, like, anything took place. He didn't know. And it was also believed he just wasn't in his right mind when he just walked into that police station and said he did it. It's believed, like, maybe he was drunk, on drugs, I don't know. But he did not do it. He just, for a little bit of time, thought, yeah, I did it. And it makes me chuckle, because I wonder if he was sitting, like, he woke up, like, if he had food, or, like, he's back sound of mind, like, the next day or whatever, and he's like, what? He's like, what did I say? Like, so Kenneth didn't do it, but he was a suspect, and he was tried. He was just not found guilty because there's no evidence. Now, none of the other ones will make you giggle, just to warn you. So the second main suspect is Mungo, Ireland. Never heard the name Mungo before, but I'm very American, so maybe this is common over there. So he was a married man in his 40s. I saw he also had children, I believe, who worked as a security guard on night shift at the Huron Trading Estate, which has been mentioned a couple times where bodies and the paint had been found. He became the main suspect after Bridget was found, so the final victim. It's due to him being on night shift, which less people around, but also he would have access to the hiding spot they found for the paint. Now, shortly after this info became public, like who they were looking for, they never said his name. They had the code name for him called Big John, but they said they're looking into Big John, who again married 40s kids. They didn't say his actual name to the public, but Mungo would put together that this was him, and he would commit suicide in 1970. I do want to note the timelines differ between articles. So one source saying 1970, one source said a couple of years earlier. But it's between 65 and 70 that this would come out and he would commit suicide. Now, I believe it was carbon monoxide, he shut himself into his garage and let the car run. And he actually left a note for his wife saying, well, many things, but main part was, quote, "I can't stick it any longer," end quote. Kind of implying he felt guilty for something. So in him committing suicide and leaving this note with those words made the police believe even more strongly that this was their guy. However, it's actually believed he was in Scotland during the time of some of the murders. Because he is from Scotland, so he'd obviously go visit a lot. And I believe at the time he had started a new job in Scotland, or he was doing work for his job in Scotland. He went back and forth a lot from what I saw. And he was actually in Scotland the night of Bridget's murder. But again, that's where I got a bit confused, because I'm like, how do they know the night when she was missing for a month? And she wasn't in the best state when they found her. So that's why I'm like, are they guessing her exact night of murder? Or I'm not entirely sure. But it's believed he was not in London when Bridget was murdered. Now, because it was for work, there's documents, papers to prove he was, but the police think these could have been falsified, which I guess is true. But I also learned, and the police and the public, that the morning he was found dead, he was also supposed to appear in court it was an involvement in a traffic accident. So now it's debated, I don't know the details of the traffic incident, if someone was killed, hurt, I don't quite know. Was he actually the killer and didn't want to get caught, or was he guilty, feeling guilty for this traffic incident and didn't want to deal with that? So when I learned that, I'm kind of I don't know. Now, on the other hand, police would point out that the killings would stop after his suicide. But then again, depending on the source of when he committed suicide, the killings would have stopped before. So again, this is where it's a bit confusing to me in my brain. And I'm sorry I'm not giving you exact details, because I'm confused. But as of 2006 and 2007, police seem to think he was the killer. They unofficially got their guy, but they can't officially say it without, I think, concrete evidence. It could be different across the pond, I don't quite know. So they can't, the case can't be officially said it's solved or closed, but a lot of them think unofficially it was Mungo. But a lot of people, I might be leaning that way, believe it was the lead on the case, John DeRosa's way to save face, because John was known for solving cases and solving them fast, really fast. I think he had the nickname 4-Day John. He could solve cases in days. And this was the only one that like he couldn't. So part of me is like, I could very easily see anyone if they're petty, but especially a guy who has the nickname 4-Day John. Like, he was called in from vacation to solve this. Like, it feels like he could have a bit of an ego and would want like this to be solved. Like, this is his one case he couldn't do. I could see it. I obviously don't know for sure, but I can see it. So it's believed he could have maybe just targeted Mungo just to say, did it. Because I also didn't see any like physical evidence mentioned for Mungo. I don't really know why they quote unquote chose him, like what made him a suspect over like any other worker on that plant, because there was a lot. And he wasn't the only night shift worker, so I don't know why him over any other worker. I'm sure there's more stuff, but I just couldn't find it. So he's like to the police, he was the main suspect. But that is our second suspect. Now, the third main suspect is Freddie Mills. I don't recognize the name, but apparently he was a British light heavyweight boxing champion. If you recognize that name, that's probably why. Now, I won't dive too deep into him because there is a lot about him. And not really anything to do with the case. There's a lot about that guy. There was no physical evidence to tie him to the case. I mean, he's a strong dude. He could have easily done it. But it was mainly people saying they heard he did it from someone else. Like, a lot of gang members were mentioned. Like, someone heard it from a source who learned it from a gang member. It was like a game of telephone, essentially, from what I saw. That's how they kind of put him up as a suspect. Now, his death was a bit suspicious since he was found shot dead in his car. It was ruled a suicide. Not everyone thinks it was. Again, they think maybe it was the mob or a gang. Again, there's a lot with Freddie that we're not going to get into. But they also noted the killings did stop around this point. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean he was the killer. So I don't know if he was ever like a true suspect. Like if he was actually like interviewed by the police. Like if he was even on their radar. But he was mentioned in nearly every article I saw. So just wanted to throw it out there. He's an interesting guy though. Rest in peace. Now the fourth main suspect was... And there's no name. It just says a Metro police officer. Okay, never saw a name for him. Now, this cop was mentioned a few times in books and in articles written about the case. Again, never a name that I'm aware of. I don't know if there's any solid evidence for this, but it does tie into the idea that Mungo was framed. Like, it could be, again, John wanting to say the murder solved, and with Mungo no longer being alive, he can't defend himself. Or something we have seen before and many times past and unfortunately present. Cops will protect their own. Like if it was a cop, they could have just pinned it on Mungo or just conveniently not solve it. You know what I mean? So but again, I'm like, if they knew, they just got the guy to stop killing, or they like taught him how to be better at it. Like, I don't quite know. It was just, again, there's no specific name or person tied to it that I'm aware of, but there has been theories it was someone on the police force. So that's the fourth suspect. Now, the fifth suspect was Tommy Butler. Now, he was the superintendent of the Metro Police's flying squad, which I saw their main focus was robbers. I just did a quick little Google of what that was. I was like, what the heck is a flying squad? I didn't see anything evidence-wise to suggest it was him, Tommy, but it was alleged in a 2002 book called The Survivor, which was written by Jimmy Evans and Martin Short. And again, not that Martin Short. That one I did have to like actually search because you never know. It was just this book like seemed to imply he was the culprit. I didn't really see anything else that really painted him as a culprit. But again, maybe this could tie into them framing Mungo and covering for their own. But again, I didn't really see anything that would tie Tommy to this. Now, the sixth and final suspect, like main suspect, is Harold Jones. Now he could have his own video. Maybe I'll do that. He's a known killer. So just to throw that out there, there's a lot of info. I will try to keep it short since you've been here a while. But Harold, again, was a convicted murderer from Wales. He killed 2 young girls in 1921 when he was 15. Granted, you shouldn't be killing anyone at any age, but I was a sophomore in high school when I was 15. My gosh. Now, since he was 15, he was too young for the death penalty, so he got life in prison. But he was released, yes, in 1941 when he was 35 for great behavior. Which, 35 isn't old. He served 20 years, and he was only 35 when he came out. Isn't that crazy? When I just really thought about that, I'm like, that is insane. Anyway, fast forward a bit. By 1947, he is living in London, and he is living, like, going by the name Harry Stevens. Now, his whereabouts are actually unknown between 1962 and 1965, which is when 7 out of the 8 murders happened. The last victim, Bridget, she actually went missing on his birthday. So, again, that could be a coincidence, but it's like, it's a bit suspicious, especially since they didn't know where he was those 3 years. It's also noted many people do think he is the killer since, you know, he's already a proven killer. And as I mentioned way early in the video, Margaret's son, Frank, he believes his mother was killed by Harold. He believes Harold's the killer. So that gives it a bit more merit in my opinion. And it was noted that all the murders had lots of similarities to his first murders of the little girls. Now, as of 2019, the geographic and criminal profiling for the killer has many similarities to Harold. However, he died in 1971 from bone cancer. So if they could find something to prove it was him, well, he's gone. And due to poor record keeping back then, he actually was never originally thought to be a suspect, from what I saw. So it sounds like they can't really prove it was him, even if they wanted to. And that is everything. Well, not everything, but I think you get the point. Talked about the 8 victims and now the 6 main suspects. That was a lot. If you stayed the whole time, you were the MVP. I appreciate you. I'm sorry. I didn't realize when I started this how long it would be. But here we are. Below, I will, like in the description box, I think I will list both articles I saw with Francis's son, if you're more interested about him. I will also list an article that I kept going back to a lot from the Ministry of History. I like the name. And possibly I might leave their grave links below if I can find them. I'm still debating on that. Like, so if you can leave a kind word, or I think you can donate like a flower or a tree, something like that in their honor, you can do that. But my mouth is sore. My throat's sore. That was a lot. This might be my longest one. Albert Fish took a while, but this might be longer. Again, you're the real MVP if you stayed this long. Who do you think was the killer if you stayed this long and have an opinion? Harold seems pretty dang likely in my opinion. Given, you know, he's already a killer and like the victim's children think it's him with the similarities, and then the last girl was missing on his birthday. It's just also him being gone those 3 years, like they don't know where he was, and the aliases. I'm like, you know, seems pretty likely. On one hand, I was like, the Mungo thing is a bit suspicious, but I could also easily see it being like a framing thing. Like he didn't do it, but they framed him as the killer. So I don't quite know. My gut's kind of leading me towards Harold, or was it cover-up? Don't come for me for that. But please let me know what you think, or if there's like a suspect that's not as known, please leave it below. I will read about it. But thank you, and I don't know what I'm doing next. Oh wait, yes I do. Well, I'm debating if I want to do it or not. It's very sad. These are all sad, but you get my point. Anyway, thank you. I'll see you next time with a much shorter video. Bye, guys.